All right. Let's see. I was having some audio difficulties, so can you say, somebody in the chat, let me know if you can hear the voice. And then here, I'll put a little kick in here. Just let me know how the level is on the voice and the sound. Okay. You hear, but there's a delay. Well, okay. Yeah, I mean, I have a delay. I mean, I have another window open, but on a separate computer, so I don't think it's that. Oh, well, okay. Cool. Well, let's see. Last thing we're gonna do here is set up one more camera. Let's see here. So that way, we can do a face view. Let's see here. Sorry about the delays and the hassles with this. The beauty of audio and video. Let's see here. All right, that should be correct. Get this one to connect, and then we can go for it. Almost there. There we go. Cool. Hey, what's going on? Well, hello. Yeah, sorry I was having audio issues. I wasn't able to get any of the signal from the voice or the sound into my headphones, something weird with my mixer. So I had to run it through an aux channel. Now I'm only getting it in one ear, but whatever. Good enough for what we're gonna do. Hey everybody, thanks for showing up. I'm gonna check the chat here for a sec. Awesome. Sounds like we're doing the right thing. Just want to change things up just a little. Move my chat over here. Sorry, I should probably have my act together before I start this, but you know how it is. Sometimes you just gotta crawl around on the floor and get what you need. So, what I wanted to work on today, I'm actually building some sounds and stuff like that for a couple shows that I'm gonna have coming up, and I wanted to work on that with y'all. Yeah, somebody's saying they're hearing me sort of doubly. Wonder if that is because, yes, hold on. That should be better. Sorry. Yeah, now you should only have one set of audio coming in. I had my phone set up as this face camera and did not mute the microphone on it. So should be good for now, but go ahead and let me know what you hear. So here we go. Switch view here just to an overhead, just to show everybody kind of this is what I've been working with lately. Kind of rebuilt my live set just a little bit. I talked about this on the last stream, but wanted to switch out the drums. I was using the Dig Attack for drums, and it was basically all drums that I was making on the rhythm in studio. And then I was taking those, resampling them, and just loading them into the Digitact, which was great and all. It was a lot smaller, easier to carry around, but just could not get over the power of the rhythm and the great sound of it and the controllability. So we'll talk a little bit about how I'm going to use that, different from the Digitact. I also added in the Syntakt into my setup just for some more voices, some additional control and things like that. So it's set up right now so that the Oxy is sequencing everything. So it's sequencing the modular voices and it's sequencing the voices in the Syntakt. So it's kind of interchangeable. I can take the Syntakt out if I want, take the modular out if I want, change up the kind of look and feel of everything and make it easier to carry, make it easier to travel with if I want to, or just kind of throw it all at it. And this way I've got 12 voices available here. I've got 8 in the Oxy Choral, and then 3 other voices here. So I've got a total of 23 voices that I have access to in this really compact system, plus all of the channels in the analog rhythm. Rhythm has obviously drum computer, analog drum engines, things like that, but it's also has the ability to add samples to every one of the tracks. So you can put in any kind of sample you want and get everything from drum sounds to melodic sounds to one shots to whatever, all in this. So ends up being, 23 plus 12 here, so 35 voices all in this little setup, plus the 1010 black box, which I won't be using today. I was getting a really bad ground loop when I was plugging it in here, so just decided to take that out. All kinds of audio problems today. But yeah, let's take a real quick look at the chat. If you have any questions, just throw them into the chat. Happy to answer whatever, show you whatever. This is kind of like, I'm gonna be working on stuff here today, and I just figured to go live stream in case what I'm doing helps anybody else come up with something cool for what they're doing, or something interesting that they maybe hadn't seen before, or something like that. But otherwise, if there's something you'd like me to show, happy to answer whatever. So let's see. Nice, France. Cool. Bonjour. Bienvenue. Love to see that there's people from all over the world here. Always makes it tons and tons of fun. All right, so the way I have this set up, the Oxy One is set up with, so it has multiple sequencers. Sequencer 1 is sequencing just on channels 1, 2, and 4, and those are the mono voices in my case here. So 1 is the Beehive, which is a Platts clone. 2 is the Erica Synths bassline, and 4 is the BIA from Noise Engineering. Then we have on sequencer 2, this is the Oxy Choral. So this has 8 different voices in it. You can combine them together to make polyphonic voices. I have it set up as 8 mono voices. I prefer to work with monophonic synths and have control over each note. I'm not big of a keyboard player, so having polyphony isn't super important for me, but having multiple mono voices is. So the 8 voices in this are being sequenced on the 8 tracks of sequencer 2 that's set into multi-track mode, just like sequencer 1 was. Sequencer 3 is also set into multi-mode, and that's sequencing 8 voices, the 8 digital voices in the Syntakt. And then 4, I don't really have sequencing anything right now, but that's ultimately going to be the 4 analog voices in the Syntakt. So yeah, let's see here. So when setting up these sequencers here, I'll set up the multi-track sequencers so that, for example, 3 is set up for the Syntakt. So just hold down an individual step and then you can change the output. This has 1 through 16A, 1 through 16B, 1 through 16C MIDI outputs. Plus it has 8 CV and 8 gate outputs. So the 3 mono voices in the modular are all being sequenced via CV and gate, and the rest of the voices in the choral and in the Syntactic are all being sequenced via MIDI. So I have this set up for the Syntactic. So channel 1 is MIDI 1A, 2A, 3A, 4A, 5A, and so forth. So that's voices 1 through 8. So I kind of keep an eye on which voice is which while I'm performing. So that way, one of the things that I always tell people that I think it's a really important thing when you're setting up a live set is to make sure that you put things where you can find them. Because when you're performing live, you're going to be performing in the dark. You know, there's maybe lights flashing in your eyes, and you won't always be able to see what you're doing. You won't be able to see, you know, the little names that are written on your machines and stuff. So it's really important to be able to put things so that you know where they are, so that you've got things set up that, you know, 1 through 8 on this is always going to be 1 through 8 here. So if I'm on sequencer track 4 on my Oxy 1, I know it's track 4 in the Syntactic. That's why when you go to sequencer 1 here, I've got 1, 2, and 4. I'm not using 3 because I wanted to make sure that when I'm looking at my case, my voices are 1, 2, 3, 4, but 3 is being sequenced by itself. So I skipped it on here so I wouldn't be like, oh wait, I thought that was that. And so when you're in the middle of a performance, you all of a sudden get yourself kind of thrown off and thrown around. Same thing goes for the analog rhythm, and it was also the same when I was using the dig attack, that I was trying to put things in the same spot so that I can get back and find them in the when I'm playing live, so I don't get all confused about where things are. So 1 is always a kick, 2 is always clap or snare, 3 and 4 are percussive sounds. 5 and 6 I use for the rumbles to my kick, which we'll talk about a little bit in just a few minutes. 7 and 8 are also percussion. 9 is closed hat. 10 and 11 are both open hats, and 12 is a closed hat-ish thing. It's a 16th note pattern of some sort, so that it can be used in place of a closed hat. So I always kind of use those in that same thing. So as I'm building kits, which you can do within the analog rhythm, which is one of the things I love about it, as I build the kits, I'll always build the kits in that format, so that when I change from, you know, one song to another, or one pattern to another, or if I want to do something new, I always know where everything is in here. So I always know that 1 is going to always be a kick, right? So no matter what, we'll see how this sound is here. I'm going to turn that up just a little bit. There we go. I think that's good. So yeah, so 1 is always the kick. 5 and 6 are always the rumbles that go with that kick. Or 5. And with those rumbles, I try to do 2 different kinds all the time. Again, they're different in every kit that I build, but I always try to do the one that's on 5 to be kind of more, it has less of an attack, so it's more of just kind of that kind of a true rumble, where the one on 6 will have a little bit more of an attack, and I do that with the amp envelope, and I'll show that in just a minute, so that you get a bit of rhythm that goes with that one as well. So you'll hear this one. You can hear the knock at the beginning of it, where this one, it's kind of just the rumble part. So, and I always try to set those up that way, because as I'm performing live, my sets are all improvised. So as I'm performing live, I never really know what I'm going to be doing. I never really know kind of what the next thing is going to be. So I like to have these tools all set up in such a way so that in my ear, if I say, oh, I think that this thing just needs, a little bit more percussive sound in that, well, I can go in and do that because I know where that is. It's same thing like with the hats, for example. So if we're doing like a traditional hat here. But if I don't want to just do a traditional hat, but I want to keep that kind of energy going of a 16th note, I can switch over here. And kind of depending on what kick I'm in, that sound will be different. So if I go to another kit, I can just load in a different one here. So you hear it's still 16th notes, and then this one is still hats, but it's a different hat. And then these two are open hats. And you might wonder why I've got two different open hats here. So these are in choke groups, meaning that these will choke each other, these will choke each other, so they can't both play at the same time. So if I'm playing this 16th note set and I play this hat, you don't hear it because this is choking it out. So if I want an open hat with that, I can do it on that side. Same thing over here. Here they choke each other out. This one chokes this one. And so if I want this not to choke out, I can use this one. So I just set that up because of the thing with the analog rhythm, where these two things choke each other out. For me, that's really important to be able to have the ability to do that, whether it's no matter which of the 16th note things I'm using. Maybe I'm not using either, and then it doesn't really matter which of these that I use in that scenario. You just noticed something that is really one of the main reasons why I'm using the analog rhythm as opposed to the Digitac. So one of the things, so my two favorite drum machines in the world, number one, analog rhythm. My second favorite is the Percons, which if switch to this view, the Percons is right there, back behind me. My two favorite drum machines for sure. And the thing with those two is that they both have the ability to save kits and patterns separately. Whereas with a lot of other machines, you're saving the sounds with the pattern. So with the Digitac, it's very much the same way. You're saving a pattern and the sounds with that pattern, which can be great sometimes because you want to lock certain patterns to that, certain sounds to that particular pattern. But with the rhythm, what's cool about this is that you can have all kinds of different kits. So when we go into the kit menu, I'll show you here. I don't know if you can see this. It's probably going to be really small. But if you go into the kit menu, you've got 128 kits that you can build, and those can be set up and organized any way you like so that you have the ability to swap out kits anytime live while you're playing. Then you also have all of your patterns that you can save, so you can have different versions of that. And if you keep those kits in a convention like I was mentioning before, where you've got, kicks always in the same place, if you load a new kit with a certain pattern, you can change things up. So just to give you an example of that, so this is one kit with this pattern. So you hear a kick and rumble and then this kind of stab sound. But if I go in now live and load a different kit, so you hear that it keeps the same pattern, but it just changes up the sounds that it's using over the top of that pattern. And it's just that fast to load up a kit while you're performing. So because of that, it's really super handy for improvised performance. So that way, while you're playing along, you can, if you like a particular sound, but you want to change things up with the pattern, you can do that. If you like a particular pattern, but you want to change things up with the sound, you can do that. As I mentioned, because my performances are improvised, I don't have set tracks that are built ahead of time. So that means that when I want to change tracks, like change from one song to another, there's certain cues that we listen for when we're on the dance floor, whether you notice or not, certain cues that you listen for about when it's a new song, when something new is coming in. And a lot of this comes from when you listen to DJs, you'll hear, for example, you'll hear them filter out a kick and then they'll bring in another track where they're only using the kick from that track and all of the stuff from the first track that they're using. And then they start to, with the filters on the DJ mixer, they're bringing in and out different frequencies at the same time so that you kind of have this smooth transition from one song to another. Much more complicated to do when you play live if you have tracks that are already kind of preset, like going from track 1 to track 2 to track 3 to track 4. So with this, what I do, because I'm improvising, I can change things up with individual instruments rather than bringing in a track and then filtering in individual instruments the way you would if you were DJing. So that said, that's kind of what I'm doing here with the analog rhythm. As I mentioned, the syntax is different voices. I basically set this up so it's a new pattern here. This is a blank sequencer here. And obviously you can't save presets. You can with the Oxy, but with the other ones you can't save presets in the modular. So everything's kind of new from scratch except for the drum side, which I just have some basic drum patterns so that we can hear those things. So if we go in, we've got, for example, so by default, 1 on the syntax is a kick, right? But if we don't want 1 to be a kick, we can just go into the source here and we can change that up for something else, like change it to the swarm engine. You know, so then you've got the ability to change up that sound. Shorten that up just a little bit. And you can add effects to it, a little reverb or a delay. So since that's track 1, I know it's track 1 on my sequencer, which each one of these lines on the Oxy, when it's in the multi-mode, each one of these acts like a 16-step sequencer. You can do it all the way out to 128 steps, I believe. I only ever really use 16 because I'd rather you have everything here in front of me, and then I can use different types of rhythms or different lengths of patterns or probabilities or things like that to get this to act much more like a long sequence. But it gives me a lot of control to have all of that right in one area. So we know this is 1, so let's just lay down a couple random triggers on 1. Hold on here. You know what? When I was clearing everything out, I didn't set this up. So I'm actually going to go here. Let's clear this out. I'm just going to go back to my last pattern, which was here. So this one I know is already set up correctly. Track 1. Interesting. I may have unplugged something inadvertently. Oh, actually, sorry. What I did was on this one, I actually went and started a whole bunch of new blank things. I'm just gonna go back to ones that I know already have things set up here. Get those patterns loaded. So now, if I go in and I unmute something here, There we go. All right, so we have a pattern here. I'm just gonna go ahead and clear this. Actually, clear all of these. So we can start over from scratch. All right, so again, down here we've got number 1. Let's go back to that other pattern that we were working on. See if we've got that set up correctly. Yeah, so back to that swarm engine. So now if we lay down some tracks here. So here you've got some individual things. I'm actually going to take off that delay because it's kind of cluttering things up a little bit. So what you can do with the Oxy One is you can set up each one of these sequencers in a scale with a different root note. So I like the Phrygian scale. It's kind of like a minor minor. I love how it has that kind of darker sounding sound. So I tend to put most of my stuff in Phrygian scale. Every once in a while I'll use something that's like a Persian scale or something like that. That's something that's more exotic, just because that way it doesn't sound the same as all the kind of Western music that we're always hearing. But Phrygian scale does it for me with the darkness. So this is in a Phrygian scale now with a root note of E, E2. So that means when you lay down these triggers, they're all going to be in E2, right? So if you want to change that up, you can just hold one of these down and you can turn this dial to change to a different note, but those notes are all going to be in that Phrygian scale. So if that ends up being what you like, let's bring this up just a little bit. So you can see how quickly you can dial something in, then just throw some drums with it. Okay, so let's just mute that for a minute. Now we've got some other tracks here that have just kind of the basic stuff on it, but let's go for on track 2, let's change that one up to a different voice as well. So instead of a snare, let's make that the tone 2 note. So you can get some really cool sounds really quickly with the Syntakt. One of the reasons why I have it in my setup like this is because you can dial in sounds really quickly. So then let's just put in a couple of sounds here, just random, and then we'll unmute that. And we'll change up those notes just a little bit. Change the sound up a little bit here. Shorten it up a little with the amp. Add a little reverb. Little delay. Now again, because we were building both of these in that kind of Phrygian E scale, when I unmute the first track, they're going to go together because they're already in the same scale. Go back to that one and shorten that one just a little bit more. clear that they're in the same scale. Those still go together, and then you can add again, kick back into it. Great. So you can see how you can kind of start to build up ideas. You know, it's great when you can do things like what you can do in the Oxy, where you can set things up to always be in the same key. So it really encourages you to experiment. I am not huge on going into like making a song saying, okay, I'm going to do this kind of song and it's going to have this sound and this sound and this sound and this sound. That's not at all how I write. If you do, that's cool for you. I have always admired people who can write like that and have kind of clear ideas going in. What I like to do is I like to kind of have this two-way dialogue with the machines, and how, you know, I want the machines to generate something randomly, and then I want to have my part of the dialogue where I go in and kind of dial it in. So it's cool because you can have a lot of back and forth. You get a lot of creative inspiration from the machines, and then I'm also inspired by how the workflow is and how easy it is to go in and kind of edit and change and fix and dial stuff in. So whenever I get asked, like, why do you use this piece of gear? Why do you use that piece of gear? The simple answer is, if it inspires me because of what it does on its own, and if it's a workflow that I get along with really well, that works the way my brain works, I'm gonna love that piece of gear. And if it doesn't, I won't. It doesn't matter what the company is, it doesn't matter who it is, it doesn't matter any of that stuff. It all really comes down to those two things. Is it, you know, inspirational by the sounds that it makes, and, you know, the ways that it can, you know, maybe be randomized, or, you know, the way things work together? And then, is the workflow something that for me is conducive to being creative and inspirational and easy to play? So as an example, if something has half of that but not the other half, I generally can't use it, or I don't like to use it, so I don't. One of the reasons why you don't see really any of the Roland groove boxes in here is because that workflow I just don't get along with. And there's a lot of people that love it and it's their thing. They sound great. I love the sound side of most of the Roland machines, but the workflow for me is just, it doesn't click with me. Now, some people don't click with Electron. Great. Some people won't click with the Oxy One. That's great. But for me, these work kind of the way my brain works, where if I'm sequencing something and it's like, oh, I want to change this step to have it do these 5 things different from every other step and be able to lock things to that, I love that I can do that on all these machines, because that's where, as I hear things, as I'm playing along, as I'm writing or performing stuff, I'll get ideas and I want to go in and do it in that specific thing. And with some workflows, it's like menu after menu after menu to just get to that one parameter, and then you got to back your way back out and go into a different set of menus to do that other little parameter. So I just personally like the way these work. But again, it's you know, it's up to you, whatever's the best for you. So let's take a look in the chat. I've been kind of neglecting and it's kind of going crazy here. So Ireland, awesome. Ireland, France, super international. Gotta love it. Let's see. It's inspiring, but not good for my bank account. Yeah, no, I totally get that. I'm the same way. I'll watch certain people. I love to watch, for example, Ura's channel. And every time I'm on there, I'm like, damn, I want to buy that. I want to buy that. And I have to just kind of like stop myself sometimes and go, no, I know it's cool, but it's not something that I'm gonna definitely use for sure. Let's see, what a nice surprise. Yeah, I was kind of surprised too. I wasn't planning on doing this, and then I was like, hey, I'm gonna be in here anyway. I'd much rather hang out with people virtually online than just sitting here by myself in the room. So it's nice to kind of have a little bit of the back and forth, and that's inspiring for me as well. So let's see. Yeah, the ground noise, that's coming from this mic that I have. It's a little too jacked up. I should probably turn that down just a little. Yeah, it's not a perfectly quiet studio environment in here for sure. at least I switched off the mini fridge. That's usually this background hum that I have going on. Let's see here. I like how you're using the syntax. It's fun, versatile. Yeah, it is. Oh, hey, Travarsi. I didn't realize that was you. Travarsi and I were actually messaging before. We were trying to get the two of us together on the same live stream. And I don't know how to do that with this multi-view live stream setup that I'm working with right now, but we'll put that together. Maybe actually we talked about maybe when this live stream's over, we'll switch over to her channel and do a live stream via Zoom, which is much easier to do with the talking, but I can't do all the multi-camera stuff with that yet. I'm gonna figure it out. I promise I'm gonna figure it out so we can do that. Let's see. Let's see what else. On the analog form K2 sequencer, both changing the tempo and changing the scale fraction, advanced mode, puts that track out of time with the rest of the tracks. I wish it didn't. Yeah, it's, I don't know, it's one of those creative things. It's kind of like machines that have you, that quantize when you record and others that allow you to record out. You know, sometimes it does that, but yeah, it's all a personal preference. Let's see. How long have I been using the III? I have been using these for about a year, and I have absolutely zero latency. I know there is some. I read in their materials that there's like, I want to say it's like 8 milliseconds or 12 milliseconds or something like that. Latency when you use their transmitter, that's the key. If you do it with Bluetooth, you get the same kind of latency that you get with any Bluetooth headphones. But like right now, I have, my voice is going into this mic, going into my mixer, then I have the transmitter in my mixer going back to my headphones, and the voice in my head, the echo that I hear in, you know, inside my head and what I'm hearing in the headphones is exactly the same. There's no difference between it. So for me, you could sing with these in a studio environment and you would still be just fine. As long as you use the transmitter. As soon as you go to the Bluetooth mode, it's the same as if you had AirPods. I mean, it's kind of the same, you know, unusable latency. Like you can't record stuff in live while you're using them. But with this like this, it's great because the way my studio is set up, here I can kind of show you a couple other views here. So I've got a table here in the center where I have my live setup with this kind of top-down view, but then I have a couple of other sections. So I've got like over here, one section for playing, and then on the other side, another section for playing. So generally, when I'm in here by myself, it's cool because I've got everything kind of MIDI synced together, and it all goes into my mixer, and then all goes in multi-track in Ableton. So if I want to do some stuff, I can actually play the whole room, kind of like a giant live setup. And what I love about these headphones is that you don't have to have the music cranked up loud. So, you know, like if my family's asleep upstairs and don't want to be jamming out down here, I can put the headphones on and you can move around just exactly as if you had just the music cranking in the room, which is great. I actually really love these a ton. Let's see here. Problems with sweating under my over ears. Are these leather? No, they're kind of memory foam, so they're actually super comfortable. Let's see, electronics so good. Analog Rhythms making the rest of my live set gear redundant. Yeah, it does a lot of stuff. I actually, Analog Rhythm, believe it or not, that has been the machine that I have used the least. I had one for a long time, and I actually ended up getting rid of it about less than a month ago because I had an amazing opportunity that somebody here locally wanted to trade straight up for a Moog Matriarch Black Edition. And I was like, cool, I'd rather have that because I can do a lot more unique things on that I can't do on other synths. And I've got a ton of other mono synths. So the Analog 4 was a bit redundant for me. I have, you know, I have a Sub 37, I have an SH101, I've got an MS20, I've got, you know, a whole bunch of mono synths. So having an additional mono synth wasn't super important. And the Matriarch has been a blast for sure. let's see, I've got kind of a similar setup, but I'm always wondering how to bring effects pedals, mini Euro rack as effects box in the chain. Do you have any ideas on that? Yeah, it's, you know, if you notice, I don't have a lot of effects pedals in my setup. I actually don't have any effects pedals in my setup. I did have a Blue Sky for a while that I was using, but what I tend to do is I'll use inside the analog rhythm and inside the Syntakt, I'll use those internal effects. And then within the modular, I have a couple different options. I've got the Erica Synths dual effects on a send by channel, and I've got the Endorphins Ghost on the other send from my performance mixer here. So I've got some effects that can affect these voices, and then I use the internal effects for these voices. The hard thing for me with putting in pedals is kind of like, as you see with my setup, I try to get as much as I can into a small area. And the problem is with effects pedals is that they do one thing. So if you want to have, you know, a delay, a reverb, you know, a chorus or whatever, you need a pedal for each one of those. Then you route them in a certain way. Then do you have them on sends? Do you have it on one send? Do you have it on, you know, how do you have it run? Do you have it just affecting one instrument, or do you have it affecting your whole mix? And so there's a lot of decisions to be made. And what I prefer is to have the flexibility to use different effects on different sounds kind of all over the place, and so that way I can really get the sound that I'm looking for. Now with that said, there's certain things that I would use like kind of as an end of chain, or when we're talking about performance effects, and that's why I have the Octatrack. So talk about the Octatrack for a second, because I think you can see it. Yeah, it's pushed under my modular case, but you can see the important part, which is right here. So for any of you who are familiar with EasyBot and you know his performance template, that's what I'm actually using. I've got the most recent version, and I'm using the part 1, which is the space version. Those are the effects that I ended up really kind of gelling with the most. And so here I've got a list of what those are. And what I love about this is, even though they're for the most part master effects, although some of them will go drum side only or melodic side only, they are really truly performance effects. They're very much like having a DJ mixer. So like, let's go back to playing what we were just playing a minute ago. So let's say we're playing this. Now, if I wanted to do just a regular high pass, and I can use the crossfader on the Octatrack. Or if I wanted to do a regular low pass. But then there's some much more fun effects. So like a couple of these this one is kind of like a hall reverby sound with a little looper at the end of it. So you've got a lot of effects possibilities, really super easy here. This is the SURCO effect. Thanks, Matt, for naming that one after me. So this one. So what this one does is it opens up a reverb and delay and high pass filter all at the same time. And then it kind of lets those things keep going afterwards. So as far as effects go, I don't have pedals because I have the Octatrack, I have the Ghost, the Erica Synths dual effects, and the effects within the boxes. So I kind of have a lot of effects already built into the whole setup. So it's not really, pedals aren't really a thing. Where effects pedals are great is if you're not using, for example, your Octatrack as a performance mixer. I know a lot of performers, both DJs and live performers, like to use the Allen and Heath Zone mixers, and those only have filters. They don't have any other effects built into them like Pioneer mixers do, but they do have a lot of send and return. So you can have external pedals and then you can send by channel. So you get a ton of control over that. The trade-off is, in order to get that really dialed in use of those effects, you have to bring a mixer that's like this big and weighs like 20 pounds plus all your other gear just to get that control over it. So that's why I tend to do it this way, is to get as much as I can into a really, really small space. All right, let's see here. Love your channel, thank you. Appreciate that. So informative. 2 questions for you. Would you add push 3 to your setup? If yes, why would you do that? So interestingly enough, if you look right there behind me, there's a push 3 on the table. So I do have a push 3. I don't think I'm gonna add it into my live setup. I actually like it as, I like it as Ableton here in my studio, because I don't want to go in and record push, point and click with a mouse when I'm writing music. I like to write using the equipment that's in here, but also write into Ableton so that I can go in and I can dial things in later on. With the push 3, what's great about that is that I can do just that. I can route everything into it, I can do effects, I can do whatever I want from a recording standpoint, get everything all recorded in, and then as soon as I'm ready to kind of lay things out, I can just open up Ableton Live and I can open up the project that I created in the push 3. So it's very cool for that. Now, there's an argument to be made for using a push 3 at a live setup. Now, one of the things, so I was just showing the Octatrack and all those effects. Now with the push 3, you can have kind of unlimited effects. We always talk about end of chain, and like I use an analog heat for at the end of my chain to try and get that kind of finished mastered sound, so that it sounds good in a big sound system. With the push 3, you could basically route everything through it, and then on the master, you could build an actual mastering chain. And you could have it be exactly the way you would master it if you were doing a finished track to go along with your individual gear, so you could get a much, much cleaner sound. So there's a ton of reasons to use it. Now for me, the reason why I wouldn't use it is because I'm a big fan of the hands-on of kind of knob per function, which is why I use the gear that I use here, which is why I love the modular and all of that stuff. I love to be able to dial things in by hand, do multiple things at the same time, all of those things, where when you're using something like a push 3, you have menus, you have to go to the next thing, you move to the next one. It's kind of the same reason why I didn't get along with the MPC Live when I tried that, because it does a ton of stuff, but it's all in different menus. You've only got 4 knobs, and so you have to go in and dive through, and sometimes the things are oriented, the parameters that the knobs control are oriented vertical like the knobs, sometimes they're horizontal, sometimes they're different parts of the page, so it's like really super confusing. Where the workflow for me with the Electron boxes, what's cool is you've got the screen. If you look, there's 8 parameters on that screen, and to go to a different screen, you just go 1 button, right? So the trig parameters, the source, the sample, the filter, the amp, and the LFO. So you don't have to go deeper than that. It's 1 button and you're on the page, and those 8 parameters are controlled by these 8 knobs. So if you go to the source page and you want to change the tuning, and the tuning's in that position, it's in this position here. So it's really super, super simple to get from thing to thing very fast while you're performing live. So it's, again, it all comes down to that workflow thing for me. So that's why I wouldn't use the push 3, is a workflow thing, but capability wise, man, it is unbelievably powerful. Like, there's not another machine in the world that does what the push 3 does. So I'm super impressed by it, even though I'm not going to use it in my my live setup. Let's see here. How do you like the push 3? Well, I think we just went through. Let's see. The Zoya's adult multi-effects pedal. Use the Euroboro. Yeah. Absolutely. I have wanted to try one of those. Actually, the next time, Travarsi, the next time we hang out, I want to try it, because it looks like one of those things where it kind of does all those things that you would want. I just have to see if I would kind of gel with the workflow of that kind of grid interface and having the controls over it. But yeah, it looks super, super cool. I've been toying with the idea of getting one of those. Zone DB4, yes. Actually, I don't think they make the DB4 anymore, if I'm not wrong. It's, I know there was a point where I was actually looking for one a long time ago, and it seemed like they were either just out of stock everywhere or they had stopped making them, which was unfortunate because I like the Zone sound, but I also like having everything all in one, as you can see from my gear. You know, so kind of like the Pioneer mixers that have effects actually built into them. I like that idea rather than having to bring a bunch of stuff. But yeah, the DB4 was kind of a cool compromise, and I couldn't find one anywhere. Let's see, when it comes to writing a finished track as opposed to playing a live set, does your writing process differ at all? So interesting question, because my writing has evolved a ton as I've started to play more and more live. It's one of the reasons why I haven't been releasing any music for the last couple of years, because I really want to get everything dialed in live so that my productions are a representation of what I'm doing live, rather than just these are the songs I make in the box and then these are the things that I play live, and they're two totally separate things. So I've been producing and DJing for like 30 years. I think I started on Ableton 4, so was that in like 2002, something like that? But I'd been DJing already for years before that. And produced a ton of music, doing it mostly in the box with a few live instruments, but it was always kind of a hassle to get everything working out together. It was just easier to do it in the box if we were gonna be doing it that way. So I did that. And then just before COVID, about a year before COVID, I had some health issues and I had to stay home for like 6 months. And then we rolled into COVID, where we all stayed home for about a year. And during that time, I had always wanted to kind of combine my love of production and my love of performance together into something new and different. And that was where the live stuff came from. So now my production, even though I haven't been releasing stuff, I'm kind of stockpiling tracks and waiting until I get to the things that sound the way that I like. My production workflow has gotten really different. So now, as I mentioned before, I've got my whole room set up here so that it's all MIDI synced, and all of the audio runs through my mixer, through my audio interface into Ableton. And I have a template set up that's a multi-track template so that every single instrument in here, well, with a couple of exceptions, can be multi-tracked. So it can be sent in all on its own. And the reason why I set it up that way is so that I can, when I get an idea, so you notice like ideas come quick. So when you get an idea, if you just hit record, you're recording those things in multi-track. So if something comes out of that that sounds really good, it's a lot easier to turn that into a song and kind of finish it up, arrange it out, master it the way you want. I also, I like the idea, and I've done this in Ableton for a while, I like the idea of kind of performing ideas in while you're recording them to get an idea of how the flow will go. So when I used Ableton prior to this setup, I would set everything up in the session view, and I would, I would lay out different sections in different lines. So I would be like, okay, here's my intro, here's my next section. And then I would play them in, and I would mute and unmute things and bring things in and change things while I was recording live into the arrangement view. Then you go over to the arrangement view and you've already got your song laid out. Then you just need to go in and kind of edit, add some automation, add little fills for transitions and things like that. So that's how I was producing in Ableton prior to this. And now I've just kind of taken that to the next step, where instead of performing from session view to arrangement view, I'm performing from giant room live setup into arrangement view. So it just makes it, for me, just a little bit easier. So I will be releasing some tracks before the end of this year, and already starting to work on some stuff now, but it's going to be stuff that will be based around live sounds, live performance, performing live in to make a track, so that my tracks are representative of what I'm playing live. Let's see here. By the way, thank you guys all for like joining and chatting and all that stuff. It just makes it that much more fun when everybody's kind of involved. Octatrack is definitely not knob per function. Correct. It is not. However, the Octatrack for me is its own unique animal in the world of groove boxes / electronic instruments. For me, the Octatrack is a Swiss Army knife. It can be a groove box if you want it to be. It can be a performance mixer, like how I'm using it. It can be a sampler, sample chopper. It can be a live looper. It can control all kinds of other gear via MIDI. There's all kinds of things that it can do. But the fatal mistake most people make with the Octatrack is they try to get it to do all the things at the same time. And it is not like that. And that's why I use the Swiss Army knife analogy all the time, because a Swiss Army knife has all these different tools that you can use. So you have a corkscrew and a knife and a spoon and a toothpick all in the same thing. But you don't use them all at the same time. You're not trying to pick your teeth while you cut some cheese, while you open a bottle, while you take a spoonful of something. It doesn't work correctly, but you can switch from one to the other, depending on how you set up your Swiss Army knife. It can be in one little package. It can do a lot of different things. The Octatrack for me is the same. You have to pick what you want it to do and do that with it in that instance. And then the next time do something different, or the next time do something different. So right now, with it as a performance mixer, it is knob per function, if you will. So if I'm cruising along and I just want to do high pass, I can go one button high pass, and then I can use the crossfader. Or if I want to do a loop roll, so in that case, it is knob per function. But in order for it to be that way, it takes a lot of diving in, going through menus, setting things up to get it that way. But then when it comes time to use it, it can be very much knob per function. Now, and that's where I think people kind of mix up getting it to do things, like setting it up to do things, versus actually doing the things. I love Matthew EasyBot's template because he spent hours and hours and days and weeks and months putting together all this stuff and setting it up and going through the menus and changing parameters and fixing this and changing that, so that you can load in that template and have it be knob per function. And you can do the same. Like if you want to set this up to be a live looper, you can set it up to be a looper and say, okay, when I press this scene, it loops. But it takes a long time to get that set up. But then once you're set up, you can use it like that. And what's cool is you can save each one of those things as a project. So I have this template saved in as a project, but if I want to go in and do, sample mangling, I've got another template set up for sample mangling. Just open it up and it's already set up that way. So that's the thing. It's definitely not, I totally agree with you. It's definitely not knob per function to start off with, and especially getting it set up. But once you get it set up, it's actually pretty handy that way. Let's see here. Can you turn down your mic? Yes, I can turn down my mic. How does that sound? Is that better? Maybe I'm clipping too much. Let me know if that sounds okay. Let's see here. Use it for end of chain. Has a fader module. Yes. Control the Zoya from the Datact. Oh, that's cool. I haven't seen that. I would love to see that for sure. Ever tried or thought about trying a Fader Fox as a MIDI controller? Yes, I actually have a PC-12, and I tried to set that up, and I wasn't getting enough out of it to justify having it. I'm quick enough on these machines that I can jump in and change what I want to change. And because I'm improvising, I don't have things set up in a way that you know, I always want to do it the same way. So I wasn't getting the use out of it. So I got rid of it. I've also used the Novation Launch Control XL, which works really great because it's got 8 channels. It works really great for controlling things like the electron boxes. It's great for the Digitact, actually, because you can have, like, per channel, you can set the faders to control your volume, and then you've got parameters above that you can set to control all sorts of effects parameters and stuff. So really super handy to use that. And I was using that for a while. I've also used that to control the 1010 black box, but just not, I didn't feel like I was getting enough use out of it, so it was just an extra piece of gear to carry. So I stopped using that. Let's see here. So the question here is, can you play loop with your Octatrack while loading new projects on the other Electron boxes and keep the clocks running? You can. I don't have my stuff set up as projects. As I was mentioning a little bit at the beginning, I'm improvising stuff live. So I'm kind of doing that live while I'm playing, rather than looping a set song and then setting up something else and transitioning over and then kind of fading it in. You can do that on the Octatrack. In fact, this performance template is set up so that you can loop the whole thing and play. Here, I think I can do it. I haven't done this in a while, but. What this is playing right now is the loop. So this is live, and then I fade across. This is the loop. So now, if I was to mute my drums, you notice there's still drums playing, but now if I fade back across, now it's playing without the drums. And then if I go back to the loop, and then if I bring, you know, like, let's say I change kits while I'm doing this, I can load up a different kit, and then just have, like, the kick and hat, and then fade across to this. And then go back to the recording. And then go back to that same kit that I was on before. So you can see, yes, it is definitely possible to do that. Oh crap, I wasn't even showing you that. Sorry about that. Here. I'll just show it again really quick. So I've got a loop recorded. I go to scene 16, fade across. That's my recorded loop. So then everything gets muted or stopped if you wanted to, right? And then you just fade back across. So you see there's no drums playing on the live side, but the drums are still on the recorded side. So anyway, yes, it is possible. This template is set up to be able to do that, and that's just kind of one of the examples of how you can use it as a looper. I almost never use those because I'm not transitioning between projects or between different parts or things like that. So that's less useful for me, but if that's the way you perform, it's a crazy powerful tool to be able to do that. Let's see. Load a different project on, say, my Digitact or Digitone while playing a recorded buffer in my Octatrack. Everything stops running on the Digiboxes. Is there a setting I'm missing? I don't know. Let's see here. Yeah, I'm not sure. I would have to take a look and see how that was set up. That would be a question I would actually ask Matthew, because he set up this template and he might be like, oh yeah, it's because you have this and this and this. I am by no means an Octatrack master. He is the Octatrack master. I'm more like, I'm the end user. I'm the one that plays the things live. When you want to get into how they work and making them do cool stuff, he is definitely the master. Junkie XL had a Cubase template with so many instruments and massive symphonic library for his soundtrack work. Yeah, I'm actually a huge fan of Junkie XL. I love his channel, and I love seeing his process and how he works. And I, very much do that same idea, although nowhere near like how he does it. But yeah, having things set up as, the tools that you always use, build a template, no matter what you're doing. If you're in Ableton or Cubase or Logic or whatever, build a template with all those things that you want to use and want to do. And then, or the same here, build a template in your Octatrack, build a template in your analog rhythm, whatever, so that when it comes time to sit down and make music, you just have to switch it on and make music. The worst is you get this kind of, I'm creative, I feel like it, I want to get into it, and then you sit down and you're like, okay, let's start patching things. Let's start connecting. Let's open up a new track. Let's route that track. All of a sudden the creativity's gone, and you've lost it at that moment. Let's see here. Where we at? How are you using the rhythm with the Syntax? Well, I mentioned that at the beginning if you weren't here, but I'll actually go through that a little bit. Rhythm is all drums. Syntax is no drums. That's the simple example. So I'm using Syntax as 12 monosynths. Basically, I'm using it as synth voices, and I'm controlling those with the Oxy One. So this is sequencing the voices in here. The reason I'm not using the Syntax sequencers is because the Oxy One can quantize to scale, and so that I can keep everything in the same scale when I'm improvising stuff live. The Syntax can't do that unless you're using the keyboard fold, and that's not how I'm using it. So that's why I'm sequencing this with this, but this is 12 voices that are being sequenced by this, and I'm using those as all kind of melodic, rhythmical, percussion, that kind of stuff. And then the analog rhythm I'm using completely as drums. So let's see here. Actually bought the Octatrack after watching your videos. Awesome, cool, good for me. I don't get anything from Electron, but hey, glad you're enjoying it. And I mean, the whole point of this channel, I don't talk about this enough, but people mention this stuff all the time. So I have a day job that I really love, and it allows me to be able to afford to get gear and make music as I've done for the last 30 plus years. That's been my hobby, the way that I love to spend time outside of work. This is not my job. Being on YouTube is not my job. I don't make money from these companies that I use their gear. Every once in a while, I'll get a discount on something, or they'll send me something for free to try, and to, if I want to, I make a video on it. If I don't, I don't. I don't have to do any of that stuff. So I get accused all the time of, oh, you're always positive, you must be getting paid by these companies. No, the reality is that I only do videos about gear that I personally like. If I don't like something, I'm not going to ask, hey, can I borrow one of those so I can do a video on it and rip it up? So there's a lot of gear that you won't see videos on this channel, and it's because that's not the gear that I particularly enjoy using. And then there's a lot of gear like what I've got here that you'll see a lot of videos on because I like using it, so I'll talk about using it on there. Let's see. Neil Lindstrom does a live set on YouTube with just the Octatrack and his stems in there, and it's great. Just the Octatrack. Yeah. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Headless Horseman, phenomenal techno artist. He used to have a setup that was kind of modular and some Electron boxes and things like that. I've seen just recently his new live setup is 2 Octatracks, and that's it. He's doing everything with the 2 Octatracks, which is pretty amazing. But yeah, you can put stems in there and play it, but for me, there's kind of different varying shades of playing live. For me, that's kind of like DJing in Ableton, where you put stems in and you just kind of launch them. That's a little less live for me. I kind of like the danger of jumping in there and making music while you're performing, rather than, you make a track, you break it into parts so you can load those parts in so you can reassemble them in front of people. Never been my particular preference for doing it, so that's not the way I perform. Let's see here. Anthony from Belgium. Cool. Welcome from Belgium. You guys have my favorite beer in the whole world. how many through tracks in the octatrack. So basically the way this template is set up here, so the two columns of tracks in the octatrack, track 1, 2, 3, 4 is all one path of everything that's coming in from the drum side. So 1 is a through track, 2, 3, 4, all neighbors. Then on the other side, it's from the other set of inputs, which is all the melodic stuff. And that is everything that's syntax and modular for me is going into that other side. So track 5, 6, 7, and 8. 5 is a through, 6, 7, and 8 are all neighbors. So that way you can, because with the octatrack you get 2 effects per track, and so that way you can have, you know, basically 8 effects per track or per path, so that those can be layered and made into different versions for all of these that are here. So that's basically how Matthew set it up in there, which I think is genius and super, super handy. Let's see here. Any tips on how to get going with small live gigs as a beginner, open stage, or is it all networking? Yes, both. It's kind of networking is important, like getting to know people and getting to kind of know a scene, but it also kind of depends on the scene. And something that I think that, you know, if your town has a scene, like for example, I'm in Colorado. I don't know if you guys have watched Alex Anderson, ALX 106, his YouTube channel, and he does like all the WMD videos and stuff. He's here in Denver as well, and he and the WMD guys have done an amazing job over the last few years of really kind of building and fostering a live setup community in Denver. And they do this cool thing where once a month they have, in a small bar, they do a thing that's called Freak Boutique, which is kind of like it's like an open mic night, but that you sign up for, and it's really geared towards people who are playing live hardware music for the first time, to kind of get out the nerves and to get out there in front of people, and you perform for about 15 minutes or so, and then you have a Q&A where they ask you questions about your setup, and people come up and look and see what you've got, and you chat back and forth about it. So it's a great casual way to get started. And then they also do once a month an event called Patched Out, which is in a great nightclub with a fantastic sound system here in Denver called Black Box. And that's a real true hardware live show for once you've gotten comfortable and you've played a bunch, and they bring in outside headliners and things like that. So they've built a way to kind of grow into performing live. And so if your local community has a scene like that, definitely get involved with your local synth community, your local modular community, whatever, and start to build those things and get those opportunities to play out. And then if it doesn't, you know, this doesn't get talked about enough, but if your community doesn't have a scene like that, start it. You know, go talk to a bar, some random little bar that doesn't have something going on a whatever Tuesday night, and say, hey, on Tuesday nights, can we just come in and set up a sound system and have people play this weird kind of bleepy bloopy music, and you know, they'll spend money at your bar, and you don't have anything going on Tuesday nights anyway. So if it's not already there, build it, and if it is already there, get into it and network and become a part of it. Erica Turner, hi from Valle. Wish I was there with you guys. That's my wife, by the way, and kids. They're visiting family, and so that's why I have all this time on a Sunday afternoon to live stream. Okay, let's see here. From Netherlands, awesome. Can't wait to get back to ADE this year. Cannot wait. Let's see, through tracks have effects on them. Yeah, we already talked about that. Oh, somebody from Kiel, Germany. Awesome, love that as well. Super Booth 2024, I'll be there too. Can't wait to get back. That Super Booth this year was one of the most fun, coolest things I ever went to in my whole life. That was a blast. Let's see here. Cool, look like that's it. So let's get back to some music. We've been doing a whole lot of yapping for the last hour-ish. So this that I've been working on was through the Syntact. Now let's kind of do similar stuff with the Yeah, so let's do some similar stuff with the modular up here. So again, we've got these tracks set up to go CV and gate out to the 3 voices that are here in the modular. So voice 1, voice 2, and voice 4. Voice 3, we'll touch on that one in a little bit. But again, different sequencer lanes for each one of those. So if we're playing along, that's what happens when you loop something. You can't figure out where it looped from. All right. So, yeah, I'll mute everything else here. Back into our live sound. So if we just get like a kick going here, and then we can start to unmute some of these things that, well, actually, I'm just gonna clear these out. Okay, so now we can start to do something new. So voice 1, voice 2, and voice 4. So let's go to voice 2, just do some kind of random bass line here. See what this sounds like. So the reason why I wasn't able to hear that, just so you know, my main outs from my mixer and my modular are going into the inputs in the Syntact, and the Syntact has, you know, that exterior input volume, and that was turned down because I had started something new here. So I just had to turn that back up. So we've got that going here. So you can see you've got a pattern here, and again, we can dial that in. Then if we go to track 1 and unmute that one, actually let's do this on track 3. This will be a lot more fun. So track 3, which is the BIA here, what I can do on track 3, which is another thing that's cool on this, is that I can go into make track 3 a Euclidean sequencer. So I can change the number of steps. So let's make it, let's say 9 steps long, and then let's start to put in pulses. So we've got 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, so that gives us 5 in 9 steps. You can see it's looping at a different length as the other one. Oops. I didn't follow my own advice here. That was 3, but we need 4. So now let's make 4 Euclidean. See right now it's got 9 steps, but it's or 9 steps in the Euclidean sequence with only 1 pulse. But then as you start to add them, you'll hear kind of cool rhythms develop as you add in number of pulses. You can go in and you can change the note that's on a particular step. So like on this step, if I change this note, you notice that note doesn't appear until that step gets added back in. So you see, again, with the sequencer like this, you see how quick and easy it is to dial stuff in. So you've got a lot of options. You can put in notes and patterns that you like. You can add a Euclidean sequencer, so that, again, that's the kind of the machine giving you information rather than you just putting everything into the machine. Then you can go in and individually dial in notes. Then you can go in and individually dial in the synth itself on here or in the Syntact. So that's one of the reasons why this setup works really, really well for me, because you have that amount of flexibility to be able to go around and do all kinds of stuff. Now, if we go to sequencer number two here, again, 8 tracks, but those are all going to the Oxy 1. So if we start this again, and we start to, here, I'll just take these, clear these all out of here. So now if we wanted to, we can go into track 1 and just enter in some notes, and then we go to I'll unmute it. So you'll notice, I think you can see here. Yeah. So you see this is pulsing right here on the Oxy 1 on the very first light. That means track 1 or voice 1 on the Oxy 1 is being sequenced from here. If I now sequence voice 2, you see 1 and 2 are now working. Now if I was to sequence something on 3, I'll mute this one, mute 2, and play just 1 and 3. Now what I can do is I can go to that track 1, and now I have all the controls over track 1. So I've got a filter, resonance. I've got a reverb as well. As well. And then if I want to work on that the third one, I can just switch to that channel. Let's say we wanted that particular track to be not 16 steps long. You can just hold down the end button here, and let's say we want it to be 9 steps long. So it's quick and easy to dial in polyrhythms, polymeters, Euclidean sequences, straight track sequences, any of those things that you might want to do creatively while you're kind of making stuff up on the fly. So that's kind of what I like to do with how to build stuff here. And what's really cool with the Oxy 1 as well is that so it's battery powered and it has MIDI over USB. So when I travel a ton for my day job, like I've already taken I think 40 flights this year, and I'll take this with me on the flight, and then I can use synths on my phone on the plane with MIDI over USB, or you can use AUM, or you can use any of those different things. You can make up patterns and sequences and melodies and cool things like that and store them in the Oxy One, but you can use them using a phone or an iPad or whatever. Then come back home to your live set, plug this in, and just change the routing and route it out to your Syntakt, route it to your modular, route it to like any of the other synths in the room here. So it gives a ton of freedom and flexibility to be able to create stuff while you travel and then come back in and have that be usable and functional in your studio for writing. All right, let's get back here. Gotta run. See you soon. Yes, I'll see you at Super Booth for sure. Question doesn't really have a sensible answer so much as a bunch of rules of thumb and context specific decisions, but how many elements is too many elements? Great question, and I would answer that it depends on the kind of music you're making. But for the type of techno that I like to do, less is more. And I find myself always wanting to, or always needing to kind of peel back and do less stuff. I'll build grooves in the drums and then very few elements. I generally don't have more than 3 elements at once in addition to the drums, because then I find it just gets kind of cluttered and it's not really the sound that I'm going for. It's much more about the sound design for me than it is for, like chord progressions and things like that, which you can do with the setup for sure, but that's just not the kind of music that I write. Then, for example, if you're doing, let's say you're doing house music, you're going to want to have more traditionally. So you've got your drums, you've got, your melody, you've got, a pad or some sort of a background kind of thing going with that. You might have a vocal going with that. Percussion, so there's all different types of things like that. It just really kind of depends on the kind of music that you're writing. I saw somebody performing the other day. Where did I see this? I can't remember. It was online, and they actually had a piece of tape on their live rig that said, "Let it breathe." And I think that was super genius. I don't remember who it was, but it was awesome to think about it like that. Like let your music breathe. Give it a chance to develop. Be patient with things. Don't just be like, oh, I got to add something. Got to add something else. I got to add something else. Like for everything you add, you should take something away once you get to a certain point. So that's why, particularly with the techno that I like to make, a lot of times you'll build up, and then when you get to a breakdown, there'll be certain things that you take away that you don't add back in right away, and you start back building again afterwards. Where with different types of music, like if you're making more like kind of festival EDM, you're gonna build through your breakdown, and then you're just gonna add more and more and more on top of it. So it just gets bigger and bigger. It's just the genre of music, but it really kind of depends on the type of music that you're making. Let's see here. End up getting to this thing where I just keep adding and adding until the track becomes chaotic. Yeah, totally. It's normal. I listened back to some of my earlier productions and I was just like, oh my God, what was I thinking? Like, take that out. Like some of the best productions I've ever done, some of the ones that have done the best, like, made it into, top 10, top 5. They're tracks that, I might have had 10, 12 tracks, including like kind of ear candy and effects and transitions and stuff. And then I look at some people that are building tracks in Ableton, and they've got like 70, 80 tracks in there. And I'm like, man, you're overcomplicating your life for sure. Let's see. Spend more time dialing in sounds. Yeah, Simon, I think that's really where it's at. And again, it depends on the kind of music that you're making. But I know for me, for techno, it's groove and it's sound design. Like those are the most important things. Where in other types of music, it's melodies and chord progression. But in this kind of music, it's much more primal, it's much more rhythmic, it's much more about the groove and then the sound design of your melodic elements. They can be just on one note, but if the sound design is doing cool things and filters opening up and delays here and things like that, that's what really makes it, rather than the actual melodic elements that might be in other types of music. Let's see here. Think of frequencies in your song. Yeah, Alexander, that's exactly right. That's where it gets messy. So if you have too many things adding in, there's only so much space for each element within your song, and then they end up walking over the top of each other, and you don't hear anything. So and that's one of the things I love about performing live as well, is that you'll hear and you'll be like, I'm missing something in like the high mids. So the next thing I bring in, the next thing that I write or improvise on the fly is gonna be in that frequency. I'm not like, oh, listen to this cool sub bass with this cool deep bass drum, and now I'm gonna bring in another, low end tom. You don't wanna keep doing that. Let's see here. Where are we at? Layering the same MIDI lane to multiple voices. Yes, you can do that, absolutely. Again, for me, that's sound design. So you can layer the same MIDI lane to multiple voices, so that way you're getting multiple layers, or you can play a multi-layered synth and get the exact same effect. So for me, I always try to keep it as kind of pared down as possible to make it as simple as possible. Simple is best. Cool. All right, well, that's about that. Next, I just want to talk a little bit about here in the analog rhythm, a couple of other things that I found lately that I'm really loving with it. Again, this is for performance, and this is kind of the way that I'm setting up my drum kits. So I'm setting everything up with these analog voices, so that, let me just check. Yeah, so now we don't have any of the synth voices playing right now. So within the drums, I'm setting it up with these analog voices, but then there's the ability within the rhythm to have an analog drum synth engine, and also to have a sample. So you can have either or both. And what I've been doing lately, so let's say we've got a kick like this, and then we bring in a hat. So this hat is the synth voice by itself for that hat. Okay, and I have control over that. I can make the decay longer. If I want to, I can change the transient, I can change the tone of it, I can tune it differently, right? I can change the synth engine if I want to. But where this gets really super powerful is I have in this same pattern. So if you look, this is the pattern for those hi-hats. So if you notice, it's an offbeat hi-hat, and then there's 3 other triggers that are in here that are set to, all of them are set to 25% probability. So it'll always play on the upbeat as it's going along, but then you'll get those kind of like ghost hits. And they're also set at lower volume, lower velocity. So that way you've got that. But if you want to keep, so it's kind of a complicated pattern, right? So you've got that simple upbeat, but then you've got these random things that are hitting every once in a while. So if you wanted to layer a synth with a sample, for example, using the synth engine in the Syntact and the sampler in the Digitact, you can do that if you have the same pattern in both of them, right? But if one of them has a slightly different pattern and you change the other one, they won't line up anymore. With this, I keep the same pattern for my synth engine, and then I can also add a sample on that exact same pattern. So what I did was, in this offbeat hi-hat here, I have a hi-hat sample that's a much bigger, wider hi-hat sample that's sitting there with 0 velocity right now, 0 volume. But as I dial that in, listen to how many hi-hats I get on this exact same pattern. So what I like about this is that I don't have to have 25 different open hats on different kits and find them in different places. I can really easily, if I want a lower energy one, I can just do just the synth version. Right, so let's say we've got one voice playing on this. Actually, let's do the bass one. That'll sound a little bit better. And as we're playing along, we want to build some energy in the track. Maybe we'll do a little like a high pass filter, and then when we come back from that high pass filter, we'll add in a little bit more of that other, of that sample version. So you can see it ups the energy just a little bit of your next thing. And I'm doing the same with a lot of these. So like on my closed hats here, same thing. So this is, so that's just the synth version, and then I'll dial in with the sample. Notice all of these triggers on these steps are all set with different velocities so that you get a bit of a groove and a pulse to that. Now, as I dial in the sample, it has all of those velocity differences in that exact same pattern with it. So you don't have to have a separate pattern to do the samples from the synth version. Super powerful in the rhythm. So whenever anybody asks me my favorite drum machine, I always say the Rhythm, and these are the reasons why, because you can do so much with this. Now, another cool thing with this is, let's say you find that perfect hi-hat in there using a combination of the synth and the sample, and you really love the way it sounds. You can resample that as a one shot, and then you can load that in just as a sample. And so you have a ton of power, and that's basically how I was doing all of the drums that I was using in the Dig Attack previously. Was I was making those drums here on the Rhythm, resampling them into those one shots, and then just loading them into the Dig Attack. Here, when I was doing that, I had some more control over them, but it all kind of depended on the bass sample. Here, I kind of have ultimate control. I can make any sound that I want to make just really quick, really easily on the fly. So it's crazy powerful machine just for those specific reasons. Let's see here. Trav, hi everyone, new subscriber. Cool, welcome. Glad to have you. Let's see, any ambient ambitions? It's already 11 a.m. here. Yeah, it's as far as ambient music goes, I love it, and I do hang out here and play it sometimes. It's actually a ton of fun, but for the most part, I get kind of limited time in here, and so when I'm in here, I'm spending it working on my live setup, working on my next thing, or working on a production. But yes, I do. I really enjoy doing ambient stuff as well. Hey there, Christophe, hello. Minor Joy, hello. Christophe Menon, that sounds like a French voice, French name. Are you from France or are you from Quebec? Menon, that could be either one. Anyway, welcome, glad to have you here. Remember, if you have any questions, feel free to pop those into the comments. I'm happy to answer questions about whatever, anything that maybe you have about the setup or about what you're doing. There's been some great questions about how to get gigs and that kind of stuff, but more than happy to answer any of those as well. In the meantime, go back to this. So, Christophe from France. Okay. Bonjour, bienvenue. All right, well, here we go. So again, I'm building grooves here on the Rhythm. so that we can do things that we can then build on top of those, but really, really simply. So you heard the bass line before. All right. Sorry, got carried away there a little bit. Yeah, so just to give you an example, so every single piece, with the exception of the simple drums that we had, every single piece that was just there was all that stuff that we just programmed in during this live stream. So you can see that it's just all about dialing in those things, coming up with ways to come up with ideas really quick, then improvising on those ideas. When you get something, you're like, it doesn't quite sound right, I'm going to adjust it, I'm going to change it and do whatever. When I first started playing live, one of the reasons why I got this, the WMD performance mixer, this one that's here, is because it has a headphone out and it has the ability to cue. So you could be writing something and cueing it in your headphones before you brought it in. But I actually didn't, I found that was really distracting for me because I wasn't paying attention anymore to what was going on in the room and what was the sound and like what was the crowd hearing and what was their feedback from what they were hearing. So I actually stopped doing that, and I kind of got to the point where it's like, you know what, as long as I've got it quantized to keys, so I know it's not going to be totally off, and I know my gear well enough at this point, and getting to know it better and better every day. I know it well enough so that if something sounds like total shit, I know that I can go in and fix it. I can go in and dial in that sound or fix that thing, or I know how to make sounds longer or shorter or grimier or change the octave or detune oscillators or whatever. And so that way, if I'm hearing in my head, I'm hearing something that I want to do, I can then reach into the system and do it. And I have a lot of flexibility to be able to do that too. One thing that we didn't talk about in this setup here is the, just put in some things here. We didn't talk about this first voice here. So what you were just hearing there was bass was coming from the bass line here. Easier if I show you. So that's the bass you were hearing. Was coming from that. Then we had the higher end stuff was coming from the BIA. And that's the dry signal, but they have that routed through a send going through the ghost. So if I bring in the ghost now, you'll hear what that does to the effects. So it's going out on a send through the ghost, and the ghost is coming back into its own return track, so that way I have volume control over the return of the effect. And then with this, I can change the amount of send so that it goes kind of crazy. Or I can bring it back to a normal amount. And then within the ghost, you've got everything from like the filter. Moving this filter to different areas gives you a lot of different variation in the sound. You've then got overdrive. You've got delay send, so you can stop sending to the delay or send more to the delay. You've got length of feedback. You can take off the reverb. You can send more to reverb. You've got filter resonance here, which is great as you're sweeping through if you want to kind of pick out frequencies, boost up the resonance a little bit. And you hear how that just kind of really fills out the whole spectrum of sound, and that's all coming from, this is the dry signal. And then within that dry signal, you can do things like you can open up the decay. You can change the filter. You can change the attack. You can add a little noise to the attack. You can change the wave folding. Kind of going back. This is kind of back to where we were. Now if we open up the ghost again, and start messing with those same things in here, like decay. So it gives you a ton of different options with pretty limited stuff, which is kind of the whole idea. Now, we didn't talk much about this first voice because I wasn't using it all in there, but just to show you what that one sounds like. So I'll mute these other two. So this one is it's a smaller version of the Platts. It's a clone of the Mutable Instruments Platts. But what I love about it is that in this tiny little bit of space here, I have a fully functioning synth voice because it has envelopes built into it, so there's a filter next to it, so that's like the entire voice. Then you can do FM synthesis, you've got 8 different synth voices, and you've got 8 different percussion voices. So we've got this simple sequence here going, but you can then change this up. And then you can switch to a different voice. You've even got chords. And then even with these, you can send this as well through the Ghost. And then this has an amp built into it as well. So just like with the BIA, you can adjust the decay. Change voices again. So here you get a lot of different flexibility just from one voice. And back to the beginning. Then you switch over to the percussive voices. This one sounds like Car Plus. And again, sending that through an effects pedal. So again, basically everything's built and set up in this whole setup to have a ton of flexibility and the maximum amount of sounds and voices and everything that I can have in one setup, so that it gives me a lot of options, a lot of flexibility. It's not really set up in a real traditional way where like the way a lot of people do live sets, where you're going to write tracks and then you're going to perform those tracks that you wrote. This isn't really set up for that because I'm not using patterns and banks and program changes and all of that stuff. And so it's set up in a very different way. That's why I wanted to walk through it with you guys today, because I know that it's not generally the way that a lot of people play. So maybe it'll give you some ideas, and not necessarily to play the way I do, but maybe to add some of these things into your setup. If maybe you're not playing exactly like this, but you might want some other options as far as being able to improvise. You know, a lot of live performers that I've seen also are doing things where they've got kind of a bass track, and then they build in kind of room to improvise. So this may give you some ideas of, you know, ways that you can improvise, or ways that you can set up, you know, improvisational tracks or things like that, that you can kind of improvise over the top of something that is planned in advance. So it kind of gives you the best of both worlds. You have the safety net of having something that's already set up that you can kind of fall back on if things start to go weird, but then you've also got the ability to be able to kind of improvise and kind of go off the range a little bit if you want to. All right, let's see here. Ever tried the DFAM? Actually, it's funny you say that. If you look right there on the top shelf, I actually just got, and I had been going back and forth about the DFAM, and I was like, I want to get it, do I not want to get it? I've got a ton of synths, I don't really need it, but it seems cool and I want to play around with it. And the other day, one came up on Facebook Marketplace for the DFAM and Mother 32 combo with the rack that they go together with. And I ended up getting the two together for like $700. So I couldn't pass that up. And so yes, I just got it. Like I haven't even had it for like 4 or 5 days yet. So yes, I've been playing with it a whole bunch, and it's tons of fun. It's great. It's, you know, as improvisation goes, I'm trying to figure out, you'll notice a theme here. I like to improvise, but I also like to have a certain amount of control over the improvisation. So, you know, I want things to be quantized to key. I want to be able to go in and kind of know the steps and things. And with the DFAM, I'm still trying to figure out how to kind of dial in an acceptable amount of control for me. Right now, I can kind of set it up and make some cool loops, and I could record those into Ableton and use those. But as far as like using it to perform live, I don't see that happening anytime soon, because I like the playability of the gear that I have right now. But who knows? You never know. It's always fun to kind of switch things up and play something else that's a bit different. Let's see, that was fire. Thanks. That's what I do. That's kind of like that was totally improvised in the moment, nothing planned in advance, and that's kind of the way I play. Please note that if you have an external mixer, as me, Ghost is also available as a pedal. Yes, I actually played with the pedal at Superbooth, and it's tons of fun. It's very cool, and it actually has a couple features that the Ghost module doesn't have. So it's slightly different because it's really set up so that it can be used by guitarists as well. And they had some guitars and stuff set up in their booth at the Endorphins booth at Superbooth, so that you could play guitar through it, and it was actually really cool for that as well. I mean, it's cool to have a multi-effects pedal like that you can run your guitar through, because I love that. But yeah, also you can use it as an external thing if you're not doing modular, which is a lot of fun as well. Let's see. Absolutely, I've learned so much from your style of performing and your approach to music in general. Well, thanks. I'm glad. That's kind of the whole point. The whole reason why I started this channel in the first place was when I was learning all this stuff and I was going through this, there was all this content that I wish I could find, and I couldn't find it anywhere. Like, there was nobody doing things that were actually practically helpful for people who really wanted to perform live. Now I've seen a few other ones, like Analog Kitchen does a great job with that, and you know, Lucian's videos are awesome about how to perform live, but there's not a lot of it out there. And you know, I was learning stuff and wishing that I could find some YouTube tutorials to teach me that weren't just a tutorial about like here's X piece of gear and here's how it works. There's a million of those, and I'm sure we all watch the same people. You know, as soon as I get a new piece of gear, the first thing I do is go to Loop Hop's video about it. Like we all do. But once you get beyond that, you know, okay, the mechanics, the nuts and bolts of how something works, then it's like, okay, cool, now I know how it works, but how am I gonna use it? And if you're kind of sitting alone in your bedroom or your studio or your living room at home, those ideas don't just come to you all the time. So I started this channel so that I could give some ideas about how I'm using stuff, and maybe that can help inspire some ideas for you all to use stuff in a cool, different way. Not maybe the same way I do it, or maybe the same way I do it. It doesn't really, it's not really the most important, but the most important is kind of like sharing ideas and getting ideas out there, because ideas spur new ideas. So maybe when I'm, you know, improvising, goofing around on a live something here, you might see something and go, oh, that's a cool idea. I might try something like that. I don't have that exact same setup, but with my setup, I can do something kind of similar where I do this and this. And that's kind of what I'm hoping that you guys will all get out of this. Is I wanted to make the content that I wish I could find. And also to kind of work through stuff. So as I learn things, I can show you guys stuff. Speaking of that, I want to show you guys something. I'm actually going to do a video about this just because it was kind of a cool thing. But this thing that I found the other day, I shouldn't say found, but figured out the other day. Let me just double check where we are here. Okay. All right. So, all right, so here I'm going to play so this is sequencing one of the tracks in this intact, right? So we're on track 1 here. And it's just a really simple pattern. And if you notice, if we go into record mode, there's no triggers in here. Oh, how about if I show you guys what I'm doing? Okay, so sequencing this simple sequence into the syntact. If you go into record mode, there's no triggers here. So there's nothing being sequenced inside this box. It's all coming from outside this box. And I wanted to change things up with these, and I started to think about if you've got an Electron box or if you played around with them at all, there's this thing called trigless trigs, meaning that if you hold function and you press a trig, it'll show up as yellow instead of red. And what that is that's kind of a placeholder that you can then parameter lock things to that won't re-trigger the sequencer. Right, so it'll just do that thing when it gets to it. Like for example, over here in my hi-hats, is it in the hi-hats? No, so in my rumble, if you notice there's some trigless trigs on 1, 5, 9, and 13. What those are all set up to do is to duck the velocity of that rumble on the downbeat of the kick, so it acts kind of like this janky version of a sidechain to get you that same idea. So those are a way to use trigless trigs. But another thing you can do with trigless trigs that I hadn't realized before is now that you've set this down, if I hold this down, I can lock things to this. So let's say I want to lock, I want to change the synth parameters. I want to change the tuning. I want to change the whole sound of everything. I want to add a filter. And I want to extend it out on the amp. So I've totally changed that sound. So whenever I'm not pressing that trig, I've got my basic sound that I had from before. But when I press this down, everything that I lock to it will take effect. And then when you let it off, you go right back to where you were before. Now I can set all of these triggers up here, all 16 steps, or actually all 64 steps. Each one of them could be a different combination, and so it's acting like the scenes on the Octatrack or like scenes in the analog rhythm, but they're a little less functional. Like you don't have a crossfader, you don't have the ability to kind of dial them in, but you do have the ability to change parameters. So let's just do one that's just kind of a basic version where let's just change the note. Let's just tune it up. Let's tune it up. 12 semitones, so 1 octave. And let's just open it up just a little. So let's say we're playing along with our kick and our hat here. And we decide that we want to add in a little break, and we do our high pass, and we want to go up an octave while we do that. Crazy on that other one that we did. So you see, it's a way to kind of do a discount version of the scenes and the performance effects that you have in these two machines. In the Syntact, it also works in the D-Tact, it also works in the D-Tone. I tried it in all of them, and you can do the same thing. Things to be careful with. You have to be in record mode. So when you're in record mode, those will show up. What that means is if you hold something down to use it and then let it go, it will work. But if you just tap it, it turns into a regular trigger and you can't get it back, right? Unless you do like the same thing again. But if you tap it twice, it's gone, right? Then you come back on this trig, and all those locks are gone now. So because you're in record mode and in like step sequencing mode, if you accidentally take something away or add something in, it's gonna be gone. So it's not really set up to do this, but this was just kind of like this random side thing that I found the other day that I thought was pretty cool. And it gives you the opportunity, let's say you don't have an Octatrack or you don't have an analog rhythm and you wanna have some things that are more performance effect sounding. So like, if we go back into this one, you can go into the amp and let's say you add a bunch of reverb and a delay onto this as well. So then when we're playing along, and then you decide to open this up when you do your break. So it's not only the like velocity and pitch. You could also any of the parameters of the synth, and you've got your delay, your reverb, panning. You can add into there. You can actually parameter lock different controls of the LFO to it. So if you wanted to make it so that if your LFO is like making your panning go from side to side, and then when you press down on this, it makes it go side to side faster, you can do that. And so all of that you can lock to these trigless trigs, and those will all then kind of act like a discount version of the performance scenes that you have in the other machines. So yeah, just some like random thing that I figured out the other day and then I wanted to share with you guys, but I'll do a video on it. But figure for any of you who have tuned in for this long for this live stream, you should get something extra out of it. So your hot tip of the day is discount performance scenes in using trigless trigs in your Electron boxes. Let's see here. Style or approach of my live set is in between your style and EasyBot style of making tracks and performing them kind of prepared. Yeah, I think that's really the more traditional way to play live, is building tracks and transitioning from one to the other. A lot of my friends do it exactly that way. And then they'll build kind of ways that they can improvise into it. But But yeah, you have a lot of control that way, that you don't. The way that I perform, the way I perform can be a little nerve-wracking. So I tell people, I always get this moment right before I start a show, like a second before I walk on. I have this thing that goes through my head every single time that's like, why didn't you prepare something in advance, you fool? Like you should, why do you stress yourself out like this? But then when I get on and I start playing and everything is free flowing and it's this conversation with me and the machines and the crowd and all that stuff. I realize why I do it that way once I get into it. But that moment before I play, I get a big amount of doubt in my mind every single time. It's not fun. It's not fun beforehand. It's tons of fun when you're doing it. Somebody told me skydiving's like that. I haven't gotten the guts to do that, but they said that it's super scary before you do it, but then when you do it, it's fun. It's kind of the same with this. Although way safer. I'm not gonna hit the ground hard. Let's see. EasyBot's performance template is the key ingredient. I could not possibly agree more. I have told Matthew this a dozen times or more that I couldn't do my live gigs without his performance template. I couldn't do them the way I do them. When he came out with that and I started using it, it changed 100% the way I perform, because like I mentioned, I come from a DJ background, and it was always really frustrating to me that the only real control I had was like volume and mutes. And it was really difficult to do the transitions the way I wanted to do them, and kind of making the thing sound as smooth as I wanted it to sound. As soon as this came out, I was like, yes, that is exactly what I've been looking for. And just the ability to add things in, like, we're playing along like this, just as an example, right? And let's just do. In techno, you'll be playing along and you'll have like something that's just kind of going along and you're just kind of cruising. And then you want to do a breakdown, or you think that people just need a pause for a second to reset. Well, if I didn't build that into a pre-done pattern that I was doing, I would be kind of stuck, or all I could do is like, I could mute things. That was kind of like the end of it, right? And then I could bring them back in. But if let's say I wanted to do a build-up while I did that, right? So then I could mute them. So it just gives it this completely other dimension of being able to have total control. And I kind of go back to the production side of me, where when you're producing, you're going to build a track, you're going to make your sections, and then the thing you do that makes it sound like a good track is when you go back in and you add in automation and you add in transitional elements and you add in all that stuff to make everything flow really smoothly and build, and the energy and the tension to kind of push and pull throughout the track. And if you only had, volume and mutes, that's like if you were writing a track in Ableton and all you ever did was start and stop loops and turn them up or down. But you never went back in and added kind of like a filter element or some sort of an opening reverb or whatever to transition from one track to another, or to make a break sound cool or whatever. And you would do that if you were producing. So this template allows you to do that also while you're performing live. So it just makes it a ton of fun. And it's something that I am super thankful for, and I give Matthew all the props in the world for coming up with this, because it's a genius thing, and he did such a great job at it. And I know the hundreds of hours that went into it, so I really appreciate it, and it makes my live sets. And I'm excited to actually show him how I use it live firsthand, coming up a little bit later this month. I don't want to spoil all the fun, but I'm going to be playing with him later this month. We'll announce something else coming up pretty soon. So if you have any other questions or comments or anything you want to put in the chat, go ahead and do that. And we'll kind of get this all wrapped up here pretty soon. I think you've heard me yap enough for today. But if you've got other questions, I'm happy to answer them, or anything you'd like me to show you in my live setup or explain anything about how I'm doing, happy to do that. But otherwise, I think I'm going to sign off for now, and I'm going to reach out to Travarsi, so keep an eye on her channel, because we may end up jumping on another live stream right after this on her channel if she's still down for that. So it will be it'll be fun. It'll be over on that over on Travarsi's channel. So definitely take a look over there. In the next few minutes, we may end up hopping right back on again. But in the meantime, thank you guys very much for tuning in. Great to have you here, and feel free to share these videos with your friends. It does a great thing for, you know, getting a little bit more views, a little bit more publicity for the videos, gets them spread out a little bit farther. And subscribe to the channel if you want. That way you get notified. As you see, I do these things randomly. I don't just kind of schedule and do them all the time. So if you want to get notified when the next one pops up, subscribe and then hit the bell next to that. So that way when I'm randomly going to go live, it will pop up in your feed, and you'll get a notification that I'm about to go live, so that we can hang out and chat. But in the meantime, once this gets posted on there, feel free to post anything else you have to say, questions, comments, or anything in the comments down below the video once it posts to the actual live bit on YouTube. And yeah, so we'll see y'all next time. Thank you guys all for tuning in, and hope you have a ton of fun making music. Hope you got something out of this, and yeah, enjoy yourselves. Make something cool. Talk to you later. Bye.